Most men believe decline comes quietly with age, with slower bodies, with bad luck, with time running out. But what if that's not the truth? What if the real damage doesn't come from getting older, but from staying in places where your spirit is slowly suffocating? After 50, a man doesn't lose strength naturally. He loses it when his life turns into emotional maintenance, silent pressure, and constant self-censorship. When peace has to be negotiated and calm feels like permission. Today, this isn't about leaving relationships. It's about why men who reclaim inner freedom after 50 begin to look younger, think sharper, and live longer, while others quietly fade inside lives that look stable from the outside. This isn't motivation. It's reality. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You've seen this man before, even if you didn't notice him consciously. Mid-50s. Married for decades. Stable life. Respectable on paper. Nothing wrong that you could point to. And yet something feels off the moment he enters the room. His posture is slightly collapsed, like gravity works harder on him. His eyes keep drifting toward his phone, not with excitement, but with quiet alertness, as if his sense of safety depends on what message might appear next, or whether silence itself is about to turn into a problem. This is not aging. This is psychological shrinking. And it doesn't happen overnight. Around the age of 50, a man is supposed to be at his strongest internally. He has experience instead of impulse, perspective instead of noise, resources instead of desperation. This should be the phase where he finally expands into himself. But in unhealthy relationship dynamics, this exact moment becomes dangerous. Because growth threatens systems built on control, predictability, and emotional dependency. Any sign of independence starts to feel risky. A new hobby suddenly raises suspicion. Taking better care of his body is framed as vanity. A change in clothing, routine, or interest is subtly questioned. Not directly at first, through jokes, sarcasm, raised eyebrows, carefully placed comments. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to make him hesitate. Just enough to teach him that being more himself creates friction. So he adapts. Quietly. He learns that it's easier to shrink than to explain. Easier to abandon interests than to defend them. Easier to dull his edges than to trigger conflict. Over time, his personality becomes smaller, safer, more predictable. Not because he wants less from life, but because he wants peace. And the tragedy is that the peace he's buying is temporary, while the cost is permanent. This is how men fade while still physically present. Not through explosions or betrayal, but through 1,000 small self-erasures. He stops dreaming out loud. He stops initiating. He stops expecting joy. And eventually, even he forgets that something is missing, only that life feels heavier than it should. A free man after 50 moves in the opposite direction. Without constant emotional negotiation, his energy returns to him. He no longer needs permission to exist fully. His nervous system calms. His posture changes. His curiosity comes back online. He doesn't expand aggressively or selfishly. He expands naturally, the way men do when they're no longer shrinking to fit someone else's comfort zone. And that difference is visible long before a word is spoken. By the time a man reaches his early 50s, he has usually built something tangible. Not just money but structure. Savings set aside. Property paid down. A sense of stability earned through decades of discipline, missed pleasures, and long-term thinking. This foundation isn't luxury, it's survival planning. It's the insurance policy meant to protect his health, his dignity, and his independence in the years when time finally becomes more valuable than income. But inside codependent or unhealthy relationships, something quiet begins to shift. His resources slowly stop feeling like his. Not overnight. Not through demands at first. It begins with reasonable-sounding requests. Temporary needs. Emotional appeals framed as just this once. And because he's responsible, because he cares, because he doesn't want to be seen as selfish, he agrees. Each agreement feels harmless in isolation. But together they form a pattern. Over time, requests harden into expectations. Expectations turn into pressure. Pressure disguises itself as concern. We should do this for security. I'm worried about our future. A real partner would understand. And before he realizes it, his financial decisions are no longer driven by strategy, they're driven by emotional management. Money, which should create freedom, becomes a leash. This is where many men get trapped, because they confuse generosity with obligation. They mistake financial availability for emotional responsibility. In healthy partnerships, money remains a shared tool used to support mutual dignity. Boundaries exist. Transparency exists. Both people respect that what was built before the relationship deserves protection. No one feels entitled to decades they didn't help carry. In unhealthy dynamics, finances become a method of control. Spending is encouraged in directions that create dependence. Assets are subtly redirected. Ownership becomes blurred. Long-term planning gives way to short-term comfort for others. And the man slowly loses the one thing his resources were meant to guarantee: choice. Choice to slow down. Choice to invest in his health. Choice to say no without fear of conflict or withdrawal. A free man understands a hard but necessary truth. His resources are not proof of love. They are not a test of loyalty. They are the accumulated result of his life's effort, and they exist to protect his future self. Love that requires financial surrender isn't love. It's access. And once access replaces partnership, the relationship stops being a source of strength and starts becoming a quiet extraction. This awareness alone changes everything. Stress doesn't arrive like a punch. It seeps in quietly, day after day, conversation after conversation, tone after tone. And that's exactly why it's so dangerous. Medical science has been clear for years. Chronic emotional tension damages the male body faster than many visible bad habits. Not because it's dramatic, but because it never stops. The body doesn't know how to rest when the mind is always bracing for impact. Walking on eggshells rewires the nervous system. Suppressing anger keeps the body in a permanent state of readiness. Managing someone else's moods trains the brain to stay alert even during moments that should be safe. Over time, this constant low-grade stress becomes the background noise of life. And the body pays the bill silently, through elevated blood pressure, disturbed sleep, hormonal imbalance, and slow internal wear that no annual checkup can fully explain. After 50, the male nervous system has different needs. It doesn't need stimulation. It doesn't need chaos. It needs recovery. This is the stage of life where repair matters more than performance. Where quality of rest determines clarity of thought. Where peace is no longer a luxury, it's a biological requirement. When that need is ignored, the body compensates until it can't anymore. A man who lives in calm experiences life differently at a cellular level. He sleeps deeper not because he's tired, but because his system finally feels safe enough to shut down. His thinking slows in a healthy way. Fewer racing thoughts, fewer imaginary conflicts, fewer rehearsed arguments in his head. His body heals more efficiently because it's no longer spending energy on defense. This is why silence is so often misunderstood. Chosen silence is not emptiness. It's medicine. A peaceful home lowers cortisol levels. It stabilizes heart rhythms. It allows the brain to switch from survival mode into restoration mode. These aren't motivational slogans. They are measurable biological effects. In contrast, a home filled with tension becomes a training ground for disease. Even when nothing is said, the body senses instability. Muscles remain tight. Breathing stays shallow. Sleep becomes fragmented. The man may look functional from the outside, but internally, his system is slowly being taxed beyond its limits. Peace doesn't just feel good, it extends life. It sharpens judgment. It preserves strength. And after 50, that difference isn't theoretical. It's the line between aging with clarity or aging in quiet exhaustion. Biology doesn't negotiate. It responds only to the environment you live in every day. Isolation rarely arrives with an argument. It doesn't slam doors or issue ultimatums. It slips in quietly, wrapped in concern and good intentions. Accumuyo. A suggestion there. Nothing aggressive. Nothing that feels like control at first. Just enough to make you question whether certain people in your life are really worth the effort. Your friend isn't good for you. He puts strange ideas in your head. Why do you even need them anymore? Let's just stay home tonight. Each sentence sounds reasonable on its own. even caring. But over time, these small nudges begin to reshape your behavior. You start canceling plans not because you don't want to go, but because it feels easier than dealing with the tension that follows. You tell yourself you'll meet them another time, another week, another month, and slowly, without a fight, your world gets smaller. As friends fade into the background, something more dangerous happens. Your perspective narrows. The people who once challenged you, laughed with you, and reminded you who you were before compromise slowly disappear. In their place remains a much smaller echo chamber. Voices that benefit from your predictability, your availability, and your compliance. Without realizing it, you begin to measure reality through a single lens. This is how social erosion works. Not through force but through comfort. Not through isolation imposed but isolation accepted. And once a man loses his external points of reference, his internal compass weakens. Doubts that could have been cleared in a single honest conversation with a trusted friend instead grow unchecked. Critical thinking dulls. Confidence erodes. The man begins to feel uncertain without knowing why. This is also why isolation is such a powerful tool of control. A man surrounded only by people who reinforce a single narrative becomes easier to manage. He loses contrast. He loses grounding. He loses the subtle reminders of his own strength that come from being seen and respected by equals. A free man after 50 does the opposite. He intentionally rebuilds his environment. He reconnects with people who speak honestly, not cautiously. He chooses company that energizes rather than monitors him. Conversations that expand his thinking instead of shrinking it. This alone begins to restore confidence, often faster than years of therapy. The return of a strong social circle doesn't just bring companionship. It brings perspective. It brings reality checks. It brings laughter that doesn't require explanation. And most importantly, it returns to a man the quiet certainty that he is not alone in his thoughts, and never was. There is a quiet crossroads many people reach after 50, and most don't even realize it exists. On one side is creation. On the other is decay. What decides the direction isn't money, health, or luck. It's the emotional atmosphere you live in every day. Many long-term couples slowly drift into a shared culture of negativity. Not because they're bad people, but because complaining becomes the easiest way to connect. Conversations begin to orbit around the same themes. Aches and diagnoses. Rising prices. Disappointments from the past. Mistakes that can't be undone. Over time, this repetition creates a closed emotional loop where stagnation becomes the shared language. Nothing new is invited in because novelty feels disruptive. Curiosity feels unnecessary. And enthusiasm begins to sound almost inappropriate. In that environment, ambition is quietly discouraged. A man's desire to improve himself is met with indifference or subtle resistance. Optimism is treated like naivety. New ideas are labeled unrealistic. The unspoken message becomes clear. Don't grow, don't change, don't move. Just sit still and adapt to decline. And because this message is rarely spoken directly, it slowly sinks in without confrontation. This is where decay takes root. Not through collapse but through comfort. When a man has an audience for complaint, he can remain inactive while still feeling occupied. Hours pass discussing problems instead of solving them. Energy is spent analyzing why things can't improve rather than testing what might work. Over time, inertia starts to feel normal, even responsible. A man on his own doesn't have that audience. There's no one to reinforce stagnation. No one to nod along as excuses repeat. And this absence creates pressure. Not external pressure but internal honesty. Faced with silence, a man has two options: act or sit with emptiness. And for a man with strength still inside him, action becomes the natural choice. So he moves. He trains his body not for vanity but to feel alive again. He learns new skills because curiosity wakes up parts of the mind that were put to sleep. He builds experiences instead of rehearsing regrets. Not because it's easy, but because movement interrupts decline. Action replaces decay. This shift isn't dramatic. There's no sudden transformation montage. But over time it changes everything. Energy returns. Confidence follows. The man stops orbiting the past and starts building forward again. creation becomes his language. And once that happens, stagnation can no longer hold him. Remember, this isn't about breaking families, it's about reclaiming your life. After 50, your time, energy, and peace are your most valuable assets. If your relationship uplifts and inspires you, cherish it. It's rare and worth protecting. But if it drains you, controls you, or makes you shrink, it's time to reclaim your freedom. Choosing yourself isn't failure, it's clarity. It's valuing quality over appearances, calm over chaos, life over habit. Your inner peace is your true wealth, and your space is sacred. If this message resonates, subscribe to the channel, hit like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might just inspire someone else to wake up.